Hello, welcome back to the studio. Well, today I thought I'd do a painting which could be done equally well in acrylics or oils or a mixture of the two. So whatever medium you're going to paint this in, you're going to be well suited. Now, I've got a little file on my computer which contains all the little reference photographs and things that sort of trigger my sort of thoughts and memories. And I came across one that I'd been saving for a while. This one. Because it reminded me of a painting that I'd done many years ago with some of the classes, which was this one. I thought, time for a revisit. Let's repaint this, but as a more sort of grand sort of painting. And you can adapt it to do whatever medium you want. You can include a deer, or you might even want to put a moose into it, maybe a bear, or a house, or a person. It's an incredibly adaptable painting that you could do in any medium. So, time to get started. Now, I'm going to start off my painting with this grey canvas. Now, originally this was painted black and I put a coating of grey over the top of it. So I've ended up with sort of this nice sort of dark grey colour. So I don't want this to be too bright. Remember, this is supposed to be deep in the woods, this painting. So maybe tone down your canvas with a darker grey. And I know that some of you will be jumping for joy when you see these acrylic paints and gesso paints, because this is going to be using an underpainting. So a black and a white. And some of my other favourite tools to use are, of course, a plastic plate, but you use whatever you got to hand. A piece of car sponge, which has been chewed about with a pair of pliers, or you can even use a pair of tweezers just to give it a nice sort of surface texture, like looks like the surface of the moon, which is what we're looking for. And I also recommend that for acrylics you use these synthetic brushes or really old bristle brushes. Please don't use your nice Bob Ross brushes on this, or some really good quality bristle brushes, because acrylic paint does get down into here, into the bezel, and it is a stinker to get out. You can remove it. There are solvents to get acrylic paint out of your brushes, but you can ruin a set of brushes very quickly. So I keep some synthetic ones on hand. And the very first thing I'm going to do is try and work up a little bit of a background to my painting. Now, I am going to be putting a lovely stag into my scene, but I do need to do, say, some background detail first. Then I'm going to trace this onto my canvas, and then we're going to start working the detail up on this too. So as you see, I put out some black and white, and the very first thing I want to do is to plan where I'm going to put the little sort of main feature, which is the deer. Now, as you know, I'm a firm fan of using thirds, so I want something in the lower third here to be the sort of the main focal point. If I move it too central, then we end up with sort of this sort of strange sort of nothingness happening around it. So I want my deer to be sitting in this lower third. Let's have a look at the scale. So he's quite a good size, isn't he? A nice stag. So we can see we don't really want him too low. He looks like he's running away. Let's say in the centre, and too high, well, that's just ridiculous, isn't it? So somewhere around about here, the main body, somewhere in here. So let's have a think about putting a little mark there on the canvas. I'm going to get my piece of sponge, maybe get a little bit of black, make a little mark. So that's where his feet are going to sit. I think that's probably about right. And I'm going to just stipple this in here. Just a nice raggedy sort of shape. Remember, this is supposed to be in a forest, so I don't want a straight edge. And say this is just a position. Now we will come in here obviously and do something with this foreground area, but just behind where the deer is going to be standing, or the stag is going to be standing, I want this to have some detail in it, but I don't want pure black, because I want the stag to be in silhouette. And if I have a black background and a black silhouette, well, we won't see much of the stag. So I'm going to take a touch of white and a good touch of the black. And I'm going to sort of kind of mark out where I think some nice background foliage might be. And again, notice when I'm dabbing, I touch and I turn continuously. What I want to avoid doing is making that sort of potato print sort of shape. So I turn and I use my sponge on a corner sometimes, and I get some nice sort of straight edge detail going, or I flip my sponge on its side and I'm continuously moving and rotating it, not twisting it on the canvas because that produces a swirl, but I'm always turning it at different angles. And again, I'm not using a ton of paint at this stage. I'm just using this to sort of mark things out a little bit. I'll come back and darken this down when I'm happy that I've got my positions organised and that my stag sits nicely in the scene. There's enough background there, I think. Yeah, I think so. I'm going to do a little bit of time lapse, so I'm going to start adding a little bit more of this background in, and then we'll start working on some trees. So I left my canvas to dry for about half an hour, and before I start adding any more detail to my painting, I want lots of background trees. I really got to get the outline of my little stag onto my painting. Now I'm going to do this much as a silhouette. You can add more colour or more detail. Again, it's a very adaptable painting, but I need to get this outline on there. I could draw it freehand, I might do a nice job on it, but if drawing isn't your strong point, then this is a neat way of getting an outline onto a canvas or whatever you're painting on. And for this, I'm going to be using a white pastel pencil. Obviously, if I use graphite on here, it might not show. And what I'm doing is I'm just taking a white pastel pencil and just putting a nice amount on the back of this image. You can't see it obviously because it's white, but make sure you got a good amount all around the outline. And then I'm going to use a little piece of tape and I'm going to just secure my little stag to my painting, and then I'm going to use a biro and I'm going to go just around the outside edge and just transfer the outline of the stag. So I finished transferring the image to the canvas. As I mentioned, this is just pastel pencil, and what it is, I just took the pastel pencil and just reinforced the outline a little bit more and filled in the center just for filming purposes, because, well, I think I did make a bit of a mistake. I probably made my background just a shade too, it's not quite dark enough for the white to show up, and it's not quite light enough for graphite to show up, so I made a little bit of a mistake there, but it's okay. And you can see I just transferred the outline of the stag to the canvas. I can keep that and use that again sometime. And now what I want to do is I actually want to fill this in with some acrylic. And this is where, say, some nice synthetic brushes come in handy. So I'm going to just fill this in black. Remember, this is a silhouette, so I'm going to take a small amount of black acrylic or gesso and just fill it in. The pastel just gets absorbed by the paint. So here's my little stag, all blocked in, filled in. I deliberately left a little of the pastel showing through so you can still see the position of the legs. You realise that obviously this leg is at the back of the body, this leg is to the fore, and there's going to be a tummy line under there, and you can just about make out the antlers against the background. But it won't stay like this because I'm going to use some white acrylic, and I'm going to put on some little shading in here because remember this, we're going to have some rays of light coming from above, and I want to do some little shiny bits of light across his back and a little bit of referred light around his legs for artistic purposes, but we can come back to that. But as I say, just so you can see it clearly. But now I want to work on some background trees, and for this I want light grey, dark grey and black, various colours brightnesses and intensities. And again, I'm going to do some time lapse for this. I'll be using acrylic paint again, and of course different size brushes as well. Sit tight and watch what I get up to. So here's my painting so far. As you see, I spent quite some little time adding all of this background foliage and details, lots of sticks and twigs and branches, and I could add a ton more. But what I want to do is actually just put some dark foliage across the top. Because remember, we're going to try and get some rays of light to come through here, and maybe even put a few nice little green individual twigs and branches on there. So I still got my piece of sponge, go back into my black, stipple it on really well, and think about sort of darkening up that top edge first and leave a few little holes in here, but I want this pretty dark at the top. You'll notice also that I darkened out those sides. I wanted my painting to look much more as though I'm looking through it's like a lens of a camera, and by darkening out the corners it really draws your eye into the centre. Filled. The good thing about this is also any of these little stumpy branches and limbs that you didn't quite finish off, you can just put a dab of paint over them and you kind of hide things up a little bit. Now I think just having a look at the shape of things up here, maybe I just want to put a little bit more of a, I want to darken this out a little bit more. This is where my rays of light are coming through, and they will rely upon having a little bit more of a shadow to work against. They will work more effectively if they've got a bit of dark background. And you might just want to come back and just add a little bit of something around them, just to kind of sort of cover up the little foots, as Bob would say. Might also get some lighter grey colours, just some lighter grey tones, and put some little bushes in here. Have a ton of fun with this. Mind the little stag's foot, don't lose that. And if you do something like that and you think, no, it doesn't look so good, pick up a little bit of the black. Oh, you can have a little quick go at touching it up. There we are. So my stag is set into my forest. I've got my dark canopy over the top. I'm going to let this sit and dry and have a look at it. If I need to, I can come back and add a few more sticks and twigs. I'll see what I feel like. Don't forget, give these a nice wash. So this is where we are with our painting so far. And as you can see, the stag, well, it almost disappears into the background. I left just the merest little bit of the pastel pencil showing through just so that it wouldn't disappear completely. But we can't leave it like that. We need to bring some of these details forward in the painting. And I'm going to use a technique called dry brushing. Now this is where you need to have something like an old bristle brush. They tend to work better than synthetics. But the idea is I'm going to take some acrylic and I'm going to use just the very smallest amount, and I'm going to actually sort of scrub it into my canvas. Now I've got a test canvas which I'm going to pull up in a second. I'm going to do some demonstrations for you because I can use dry brushing to make my little stag appear 3D. I can also do some rays of light with dry brushing. So again, this is all being done in acrylics. After this stage though, I'm going to start working in oils, but dry brushing first. Sit tight. So here's a little test canvas. It's one of my old scruffy canvases that I painted with some black gesso. It's a little bit smooth and shiny, but it'll work. And once again, I've got some white acrylic paint, and as I mentioned, a very old scruffy round bristle brush, and I'm going to take just the smallest amount, and I'm talking just enough to make the bristles just slightly white. If you think you've got too much on, take a little bit off. So my brush is as good as dry to the touch, but if we don't wait too long, we can simply push it against the canvas. Make it a little bit brighter. As you see, if I use a little pressure on the brush, the roughness of the canvas starts to remove some paint. And if we sit in one spot long enough and scrub, we can start to deposit some paint. And you can do this progressively, taking a very small amount of white, gently pressing on the canvas, and building up layers of paint. As you see, you can get some lovely soft effects with this. If you want to make a round curve, you just use the brush, and it's sort of like shading, but with white acrylic. Another small amount of paint. Now, this is something you will do in acrylics, but if you're using oils, you can dry brush with oils. So again, I've got a very small amount of this white on my brush, the white acrylic, and I'm going to use one of my marl sticks, and I'm going to just drag my brush backwards and forwards. Remember, light goes in straight lines. It can be diffused, of course, it can be softened. So the lovely thing about this is that it's very progressive. See, ooh, a bit too much there, but it's okay. So you can get that to fade out. It looks like a spotlight, doesn't it? So dry brushing. It's a beautiful technique, and one I think you'll enjoy doing. So let's put some of this on our painting. Okay, so there's my old brush. Now it's sat for a couple of minutes whilst I rearranged the easels and the camera and everything. And of course what's happened is it's dried out a little bit. It's gone a bit crusty. But look, you can put your brush on a piece of dry paper towel, give it a quick twirl around, and you can break up the acrylic paint again, and your brush becomes once again usable. Now, top tip on this, when you're dry brushing, if you wash your brush, dry it really thoroughly, because it will stop being a dry brush and it will start being a wet brush, obviously. So there you go, I knocked out all the extra paint. I've gone back into my acrylic. You can see that's already started to skin. Take a small amount, and if you're not sure, you can test it somewhere on your canvas. Maybe you just test it over to one side, get a feel for it. And I want the light to be coming down from this top right hand corner, so I think the top of my stag is going to be catching a little light. What I'll do is I'll just put a few dabs of black acrylic over that just to cover it up again. Imagine he's rounded, so I think you're going to see a little more light on that part of his body. Now, let's say he's got a nice round shape to him, so I'm going to again follow the contours of this stag's body. This leg I want to look like it's coming slightly forward, so I'm going to put just the merest amount of highlighting there on the leg. I think his leg is going to catch a little bit more light. So I've made that leg, looks like it's coming forwards again in the painting. See, so my stag is slowly appearing, but as I say, do a little bit of this, take your time, don't go too mad. The idea is he's still in silhouette, and as always I suggest doing a little bit standing back, having a look from the other side of the room, make sure you're not overdoing it. Now, the big benefit of doing this is that, of course, if you completely overdo it, if you make a pickle of it, it's okay. You can let this dry, put some black acrylic or gesso over the top and have another go. It's incredibly adaptable again. So there's my little stag, highlighted with a little bit of white acrylic, and it's a little brighter than the background for good reason. I want this to be a main feature. Plus, I'm going to be glazing my painting with oils, but you can do the same effects using acrylics, as I demonstrated with those rays of light. So, next step for me is to make sure that I've got everything completed before I move on to oils. As you saw, I also fixed up my little test area with some black acrylic on the end of my finger, just smudged it in. So let's get some liquid clear going on this, and then I'm going to start applying glazes of oil colours. This is where we turn black and white into colour. So let's start adding some colour to our painting. For this, I'm going to use some Bob Ross oil paint. Now, if you don't have Bob Ross products, and this is liquid clear oil paint, you can also substitute linseed oil, but you need to apply this really sparingly. It's much more runny and thin and watery, so it's easier to overdo it with this, whereas the Bob Ross product is a bit more sort of gloopy and thick, so you can sort of spread it on there a little bit more carefully. And of course, if you're doing this with an acrylic, then you don't need to apply anything like a medium to it, because you're going to be using some very, very thin down acrylic paint to paint with. So for the oil painting stages, let's put on some liquid clear. And for this, I've got some in a little airtight pot. And I've got a very, very old Bob Ross landscape brush here that I'm going to take a small amount. You see, it's got quite honey. And I'm going to just scrub this on to my painting. Now, the one thing you'll notice when you do this is that when you go across these grey areas, you can't see very much happening. It doesn't change things. But when you go over the black areas, see how that sort of starts to sort of shine. It becomes much more sort of easy to sort of spot where you've been. So I'll show you a neat little trick in a minute, but we want to apply a thin, even coat of liquid clear to the whole canvas. And mind that word thin. We want this really scrubbed in so there's barely any on here. If it's too wet, then adding colour will cause lots of problems. So I'm going to scrub this on, and then I'll show you how to test your canvas. Now, I think I've got it covered everywhere, but I've turned the lights down really low. And can you see that there's some liquid clear here? Because you can see it's nice and shiny, and I can run my finger through it. It doesn't leave a trail. But look, there's a whole patch here, completely dry. So it's easy to miss areas when you're working with your painting. So it's a good idea to have maybe a second light source. I like to use my mobile phone. Let me go and grab that. Most mobile phones have got a camera built into them. Give your phone a little shake. There you go, it came on eventually. And can you see when you put your light across there, you can see if you've missed anywhere. There's another whole patch there I've missed. But most of my painting is pretty well covered. And I say the idea is you want a very, very thin, even coat there. So you can quickly tell where you've been if it's nice and shiny. I want to use this brush again, and it's covered in liquid clear, so don't forget, give it a nice dry clean, get all that liquid clear off so that you don't add that to your paint. Now let's have a quick look at our palette. I've got some titanium white, some Prussian blue, dark sienna, black, cad yellow, sap green and Indian yellow, and I'm going to use these colours as a glaze. Some of them are transparent, like Prussian blue is very transparent, as is the green. Colours like cadmium yellow, well, they're sort of opaque colours, in other words they cover things up, but you can scrub them on thinly. Indian yellow is a nice transparent colour. And I want my scene to be, well, I'm not quite sure. Should it be an autumn scene with a bit more of a brownish tone to it? Or maybe springtime with a bright green colour to it? Maybe even winter time. I could put a nice blue sky background and snow in the foreground. Once again, it's a very adaptable painting. You can get it to do pretty much what you want it to. I think I'm going to start off with just a touch of Prussian blue, and I mean just a tiny touch. Let's see what that looks like. I just want the suggestion here and there of a little bit of blue coming through from the background. Paint it quite high up in my painting, and I might get it to fade back down to being sort of greenish tones. Now, the beauty of using glazes in oils is if you do something you don't like, well, you can just pick up a baby wipe and just wipe it off. If you're painting with acrylics, well, you don't have quite the same sort of adaptability. But you can certainly use watered down paint, so you can use maybe an acrylic blue colour, add a lot of water to it, so it's really like a runny sort of thin thin paint, so that you can use it like a glaze. And if you put it on and you don't like it, you can just pick up a baby wipe or a paper towel and just blot it off pretty quick. But you don't have a lot of time, whereas with oils you have obviously a lot of creative time. So that's the difference. But you certainly can do this painting using acrylics as well. Right. I think I'm going to go for a touch of sap green next. Now that's quite a bright sap green colour. I might just add a hint of Indian yellow to it, just to make it sort of a little more on the lime side. Now, I'll scrub this in through here. Now, I don't want to cover up my stag, so I'm going to work carefully around mainly the body. The antlers don't matter too much, and I can always clean this up. So I'm just going to scrub a nice lime green colour in there. So I'm going to sort of get a nice sort of tone, greenish tones here and there. You scrub a little bit around up in the sky too. And say this is very much a painting you can play with and add to and take little bits away. A bit more of a greenish tone up there. Now, this being, I think I'm probably going to try and stick to my seasons. It's definitely very autumnal outside, so I might work some brownish tones in here too. You can put some brownish colours through the background sky. As I say, you can change this painting around endlessly. Now, if you want to give your painting a more sort of rustic look, you can use something like dark sienna, which is a sort of semi-transparent brown colour, maybe a bit sort of more opaque. And I'm going to use just a filbert brush for this. Just going to get just a touch to produce a nice sort of reddish colour. And just sort of back here in the distance, you might want to just add the hint of a little bit of brown coming through, maybe a little bit of there's any fallen leaves back there, just to sort of brown down your painting a little bit. As I say, this is all about playing with glazes and colours, and I'm going to put a little bit of the chestnut brown colours over my stag as well. He looks a bit like an albino right now, doesn't he? He looks a little bit too sort of pale. So I'm just putting in just some hints of rustic brown tones here and there. I don't want to kill off all my lovely green colours. They look rather beautiful, don't they? But I just think here and there, maybe just the ground level, sort of just tone things down a little bit. Let's add a little touch of colour to the stag. And I'll do a little close-up of that for you. The brush I'm going to use is that same little bristle brush that I actually did all the shading with. This had acrylic on it. It's been washed and dried thoroughly, so it's completely dry. And it's really the right sort of size brush. Again, I'm going to use a bit of the old dark sienna colour on here. And let's say when you lay this on over the top of that white acrylic, of course, the colour really shines. And of course, where you're going over the shadowy areas, it doesn't shine at all. The trick is to try and leave a little sheen of light across the back. The lower extremities you can get a bit more dark into there, but remember, we want it to look like the lights are just catching his back. Around the tummy it's going to be a bit darker. That back leg will be fairly dark. And the foreleg would definitely be dark. So just keep thinking about where the light's coming from. Anything that goes a little bit on the heavy side, you can just do a touch of a tidy up. I'm going to put a little bit of black into my dark sienna just to kind of make it a little bit more shadowy. But of course, if you're doing this with acrylics and you put a very thin wash of acrylic brown colour and it doesn't look right, then quickly pat it off before it sort of starts to dry on there too much, and you can have another go. Just using black and dark sienna just for where the legs go down into the leaf litter on the floor. Always don't want to see his feet. I think that the side of his neck over here is going to be a little bit more in shadow, and just thin glazes here, nothing too heavy. I think I want to see the back of his leg. Looks good. You see there's a little bit of green there on his back. Well, I don't mind that too much. It's called referred light. And I really don't want my deer to stand out too brightly. I want him to be sort of hidden almost in the undergrowth, because that's sort of their natural way of moving around, isn't it? Quiet and stealthy, you don't really see them until they move. So sometimes it's nice to do a painting where maybe you have to look twice to see the movie star. In this case, my little stag. Black, dark sienna. Maybe this tree here, you want to bring it forward. Let's say you want to bring it down a little further forward in the painting. You can. There you go. Brown, dark sienna. Maybe you want to bring that down, make it look like it's just partly covered by that tree. Isn't that fun? Did you think when you saw this painting you'd also see me moving a tree? Well, a couple more bits to do, and I think we'll have to get on with those rays of light. I don't think I can put that off much longer. Yeah, there we go. One little stag in the forest. It's time to add the rays of sunlight into our painting, and I'll bring this up in the corner of the screen so you've got it in a bit more detail. But what I want you to look at is the direction of the rays of light. Notice how they don't all come from exactly the same spot amongst the leaves. As you look across to the right, you see they're coming from a slightly different angle. They also don't come from a point just off the edge of the photograph. They come from way much further away, obviously, high up in the sky. You'll also notice how they look to be forming almost a curtain. Not really just individual rays, but more of a sort of a curtain of colour, like smoke, with a few highlighted rays running through the centre of them. We have to look carefully at our reference photographs, because there's always a tendency that we could end up making this look like, well, sort of laser beams hitting the top of our deer. Not terribly friendly looking, is it? So we have to think about this very carefully to add this light, and we have to have it coming through these tree branches in different spots. So some look like they're coming through further back, some look like they're coming through much closer. So I'm going to position some of these rays of light coming through closer to the ground area. Maybe one or two of them coming through a little bit closer to where we're standing in the painting. And then we'll work out where those rays of light fall on the ground. So sit tight. This is definitely the bravery test. I've swung my camera around to one side so you get a nice clear view of what I'm doing. So another quick peek at our reference picture. What colour are those rays of light? They're not white, are they? In this particular reference, they're blue or slightly lavender. So would that sort of colour work with this? Well, it might do. But one thing I do know is that pure white really is too strong. So I don't use pure white when I come to doing those rays of light. I always tint them with something. So I've got some titanium white on my palette, and I'm going to take just the tiniest little bit and just a hint of blue. I mean just a smudge. Not overdo this. There we go, so nice. White with a hint of blue. Let's compare that to my reference picture. Maybe not a very good comparison, but because one's purple and one's a bit more blue. Now I could go a little purple if I add a tiny drop of crimson to my palette. So do I go for a bit of crimson? Let's see. What I'm going to do though is make sure I knock off as much paint as I can on my palette. I'm going to knock off all the spare paint so that I put on just the smallest amount to start with. And if there is a top tip, it is to go slowly. The other thing you really need to have is one of these, and this is a mahl stick, and it's just a stick with a hook on it. It could be an old walking stick, whatever you want to make it out of, something you can hook over the top of your canvas that will act as a guide. Because remember, we don't want these going wibbly wobbly. Light tends to sort of travel in a fairly straight line, and I've got very little paint on my brush here, and I'm going to just drop in maybe just the suggestion of a few little rays of light in the background here just to kind of get a feel for it. Just a touch. You'll notice I'm using a fan brush. It's tempting to think that you need something small like a filbert brush, but I find when I'm doing rays of light you need something a little bit bigger and softer, like a fan brush. There we go, this is my very first ray of light. Look how soft and gentle that is. It's really not at all bold and bright. It's better to put on a few sort of soft ones to start with and see what it looks like. There we go. Remember, some of these are going to be running fairly parallel, some are going to be a little bit more of an angle. I must say, this is my canvas I painted yesterday, so it's a little tacky, put it that way. Can probably do with being a little bit drier, but I think for the purposes of the painting it is fine. Now I've got 4 little rays of light coming through there. Very little paint on my brush, and I might just put in the suggestion of a bit of a curtain of light. There we go. So I'm just going to run my brush gently between the two so it looks more like it's sort of forming that curtain effect we were looking at in the reference picture. Just link those up a bit more. See, I'm getting a curtain of light. Looks like it's coming through under the edge of that tree. Swing that over to the right a little bit. Again, rest your brush against the side of the stick. Let me get my hand out of the way. Now I'm going across here a little bit of the blue of my sky. So this ray of light's not going to show as well. So there's the initial rays of light coming through in the background. Do I want another one coming through over here maybe? There's a nice patch of dark green there. A little bit of blue light coming through there. Let's hook that on. Maybe I'll just take that through there. I'll drag that a little further. And I realise my stick's in the way and you couldn't quite see that, could you? Let's go the other side. So what I did is I just took my brush, a little more pressure at the top, let's pull, lift off. So that ray of light looks like it got almost completely to the ground. Now, you don't have to have all these rays linked up. Let's have a quick look at our reference again. As you see here, all of these rays of light form a complete curtain. There's sometimes gaps between, but these do form a curtain here. And these ones a little bit more split up where they're coming through in different parts of the forest canopy. Do this slowly. Take your time. Stand back often. Stand back and looked at my rays of light, and Terry had a good look as well, and she made the suggestion I take a few rays of light off the edge of the painting, and sure enough there's some little rays of light up there. But I rather like this effect where you have little speckles of highlight hitting some of these leaves. I think this would work really well up in here too. I might not do quite as many, maybe I'll just start off with a few, but they range in colour from almost completely white with a hint of yellow to quite dark green and black, so there's a big range of colours there to go for. And I'm going to use my palette knife to paint them. So let's mix up some colour. So I've got sap green, I can go to the dark side with some black, so I can pull these two together. So very, very dark green. Wipe my knife. And I got some cad yellow, so I can do some nice limey coloured ones. There. And of course, I can do some very, very pale ones. Cad yellow, touch of white. So there's my spectrum of colours. I've got everything I need to choose. Now, as I said, I'm going to use my palette knife to do this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up some little tiny dots of colour on the tip of my knife and just sort of scatter them around. Now, we just need to sort of put a few in here and there to start with. Get a sort of feel for it. Remember, these leaves are little jewels hanging in the sky. So I'm going to put a few on to start with. See what I think, but where the rays of light are coming through. Maybe one or two of these are catching a ray of light, but if I don't like it, I can always take it off. So I've taken a little tiny drop of linseed oil into my black. I'm going to use a liner brush here and take it to a nice fine tip. And see if I can just put in the suggestion of a little branch here and there. But I mean, they won't show up very much against the dark background, but certainly if I cross in front of these little rays of light, they'll show up. And again, it's really just to sort of add some context to my painting. This might be a tree that's just off to one side, so I'm going to have a few of these little branches just sort of trailing out the side of my painting. For the foreground of my painting, I have to pay attention to where some of these light rays are falling, because I think if they'd be hitting the ground here, they might be sort of highlighting an area in my painting. I'm going to use my fan brush. I think I'm done with the rays of light, so I'm going to use my fan brush, a little bit of sap green, bit of black to start with. Just a little bit of mixture of colours on my fan brush. And again, I'm going to keep this a little on the dark side to start with, and maybe sort of do a little bit of a test over here. See how bright it is. Does that show up? That's the thing, sometimes I can see this in real life, but barely see any of it on the camera. So let's put a little bit more yellow with it, a bit more cad yellow. You see I'm just using a little stabbing stroke here, just press, bend the bristles upwards. I want it to look like it's sort of maybe ferns or grass. And being in a forest, of course, it doesn't have to be nice and neat, it can be raggedy. Now bearing in mind my little deer is going to cast a nice shadow there, so I don't want to go too bright in that area. But certainly where some of these rays of light might be falling in the background here, I definitely want that a little bit brighter. And areas like this, I want that to be really nice and bright. How about that? It's quite eye-popping, isn't it? And again, a little bit over there maybe. Maybe that's a fern, just catching the edge of the fern, so I've darkened down my colour. So it looks like the rays of light just catch the edge of a fern, and the rest of it is in dark green colour. So go back down into darker greens. There we go. So you pay attention to these little details, things like this where you might have a bush there, and just part of it's catching rays of light. Small details like that can really make your painting stand out. So there we have it, a painting which can be done equally well in oils or acrylics, or a mixture of the two. You decide what suits you best. Now don't move, because there's an outtake of me doing one of my classics, and of course there's some more lovely videos for you to watch. And the title, Monarch of the Forest, has a certain regal ring to it. Thank you, Henny, for your decision. Happy painting, people. What I've done is I took a pencil and I just simply rubbed it all over the back. Good thick coating of graphite. Use a biro and with some firm pressure. Now this is about 1,000,000 times easier if you're doing this on a tabletop, which I will do, but just to give you a quick eyeball. You can't see anything. Well, that's it, folks. Come back next week. I'll do something you can see. I have to reset this and think a bit more about this. Okay, I am going to use a white graphite pencil on the back of another one of these. Take two.